Raboisai, we're back again. Pas Akum, number 2. Let's learn a little bit about it. Let's see how to avoid it. How do we get our Pas Yisroel? Okay, so as we discussed, there are different instances, different situations which we are makel by Pas Palter. If you go with the Ramah as discussed, we'll be makel pretty much always to have Pas Palter. Even if you go like the Shulchan Aruch or the Shach, who's more machmir and only allows Pas Palter in a situation where there's no Pas Yisroel around. As we said, the secret in Sifhei that maybe your mashgiach doesn't want you to know is that if the Pas Palter tastes better, you're allowed to go for the Pas Palter anyways. Now, fine. Now, the Shach, however, says, wait 1 second, not so fast. There's a little knech that a lot of people don't notice. This isn't brought in the Shulchan Aruch and it isn't brought in the Ramah, but it's a Shach, and generally when the Shach says something, we are generally machmer for the Shach. So the Shach says, in Sif Beis, which was the one that brought up all the heterim of Pas Palter last week, that if a goy bakes in a Jewish bakery, let's say, or a Jewish house, then there is no heter of Pas Palter. So let's get this straight. The cleaning lady went and put the challahs, turned on the oven and put the challahs into the oven and baked the challahs. Oh, don't worry, I eat Pas Palter. I'm not one of those frummies. Well, guess what? Zok the Shach, I don't care, even if you're really, really, really not a frummy, Zok the Shach, that bread is asur. It's not kosher, and you can't eat it. So when you have pas, even made by a guy, but even if you will generally have Pas Palter, you eat those Staradora cookies, you eat everything. You don't even, you're not even machmir for the Shach, I guess that Shach. But you go like the Ramah, and you just, that's the minhag. We have Pas Palter, as Moshe says, the minhag is like the Ramah, and you just eat Pas Palter here and there and everywhere. If the Goyish cleaning lady baked the bread in your house, it is not kosher according to the Shach, and we all are machmir for the Shach. So don't think, okay, I hold the Pas Palter, the sugya is over. The sugya is not over. Okay. Why is that? Okay, so the reason why that is, very good question. The Shach explains himself. The whole reason that we gave the heter of Pas Palter is it's too difficult. It didn't spread, the Gezeira didn't spread across Klal Yisrael because it was too difficult to go and arrange your own baking. There was only a Goyish Palter, there's only a Goyish baker in town. What are we going to do? What do you expect? You can't not eat. How are you going to manage to light the oven for the Goyish baker every day? It's not sheikh. However, if it's your house, or as I'm about to say in a minute, your bakery, you could do it. You can handle it. And therefore, since we have the expectation that you could light the oven in your own home, we have the expectation that you could light the oven in your own bakery, Mimela, the whole heter Pas Palter is not needed and therefore does not apply. And that is the chiddush of the Shach, and it's pretty mistaber. So let's think about this. You have Juan, the Hispanic fellow that works in Shlomi's Bakery. There really is a Shlomi's Bakery that I know. Let me pick a different name. Yankees Bakery. I know of 2 Shlomi's Bakeries, actually. So there's Juan works in Yankees Bakery. Yeah? And Juan says, listen, let's face it. Yankees Bakery is in a neighborhood that the people do not keep. Are makbid about Pas Palter in this neighborhood. So Yankee says, Juan, listen, we all know bakeries start 4 a.m. Let's face it, 4 a.m., not happening. Not happening. You're lucky if I make the Later's Man Kriya Shema on the side of my bed. 4 a.m. is not happening. So Yankee tells Juan, you light the oven, it'll be Pas Palter. Who cares? They all eat Pas Palter, and I'm not going to name the neighborhood. So Juan goes, lights the fire, puts the bread in. 5 hours later, Yankee rolls into the bakery and says, great bread. And Juan says, yeah, we sold tons already. Excellent, amazing. Not kosher. Shocking, huh? But then Juan's cousin What's Juan's cousin's name? Jose. Juan's cousin, Jose, he works in Dunkin' Donuts. And by the way, they both went to bagel making school together. So, they went to baking. They do the same recipe. Juan and Jose, they do the same recipe. Just Juan works at Yankees, and he makes the not kosher bread. And Jose works at Dunkin' Donuts. And they do the same recipe, and they both put it in they both turn in the oven. They both put it in the oven, and the donuts that Jose made at Dunkin' Donuts, or I think it's just called Dunkin' these days. So the Dunkin' Donuts donut is kosher. It's Pas Yisroel, okay. But the donut, the bagels that were made by Juan at Yankees Bakery, not kosher. Treif midrabanan. Wild, huh? And, even though it's crazy, but that the svar is there because it's much easier for Shlomi to arrange that it's going to be turned on by a Jew than it is in the random Dunkin' Donuts that Jose works. Now, Rav Moshe has a little saving grace, and Rav Moshe has a svara that he says like this: by a big production, by something that's a big to do. So you need lots of hired help. And there's no expectation that you're going to be able to do it all by yourself. You need help. You need goyim there. There's no, you should have done it yourself. I can't do it myself. It's too big of a job. And therefore, in a big production, then you don't have the shach does not apply. And memela, the bread will still be kosher, it will still be pas palter if the oven was started by Juan and the food was put in by Juan. Now, the issue is, what is the cutoff point? What is this big production? Once again, even if you go into Yankees Bakery, you ask Yankee, could you do this by yourself? Yankee's going to say, myself, me, 4 a.m., not happening. You know what I'm saying? And even if Yankee wanted to get up at 4 a.m., he's not doing it. He's a Jew. We don't work so hard. So it's going to be Juan who's going to be doing all that hard work. But apparently Rav Moshe said it by factories. We can rely on having the guy turn on the oven for pas palter. Do not get confused by bishul akum. Bishul akum, no way, Jose. We're talking about the baking process. By a cooking process, cooking usually means with liquid, baking usually means without liquid. It's not so clear cut, but that's the general idea. So in pas akum, in baking, dry baking, we will say that dry baking meaning 5 grains, no water. We will generally say that you could rely on the factory, the Dr. Moshe, with Juan turning on the oven and putting in. But when it comes to a bakery, no. Now, who decides what? I was trying to put this into practice. I was having a little bit of a hard time. On the bottom of Agrippa Street, next to the Shuk, is Teller Bakery. Now, this is a bakery. You could walk into the bakery, you could buy bread. Now, they also make breads that they send out to different fancy hotels and different stores throughout Yerushalayim, and maybe even further than Yerushalayim. I wouldn't be surprised. So, are they a bakery or are they a factory? They have a big production. I don't know what they're considered. I'm guessing the gather of when you're considered factory versus bakery is, what's your primary business? Is your primary business B2C, going from the business to the consumer? Or is your primary line of business B2B, going from the business to another business? I assume if your primary business is going directly to the consumer, you'd be considered a bakery. But if your primary line of business is going to other bakeries and other stores and other hotels, etc., then you'd be considered a factory. Although, that's not pashut, because you might have one bakery, as I call it, that services 5,000 people. and you have another, one that sends out to 3 different businesses that service less than 5,000 people. So it's not so clear, but I assume that would be the best gather that I could come up with. That was putting on a little bit of my business hat in terms of defining the difference. Okay, now Rabbi Yashiv did not like Rav Moshe's heter, and Rav Yashiv said, I don't care with all this. If it's owned by a Jew, the production, and a guy turns on the fire, not kosher. And it turns on the fire and puts the food in. Fine. How much baking must the Jew do? Does the Jew need to put on a baking hat and do everything from the beginning to the end? Rabbi Yisroel would have much less baked products if that's what we had to do. So what does the Jew have to do? So he could put the food into the oven. The Jew can light the fire. And once again, don't get confused with Bishul Akum. Bishul Akum, there's going to be a great controversy when it comes to lighting the fire. Oh, by the way, newsflash. I feel like the world has missed this. What is a greater act of cooking or baking? Turning on the fire or putting the food in? Answer, putting the food in is a much more primary action than turning on the fire. I'm talking about putting the food into a oven that the fire is already lit. So a lot of people think it's a gzeres hakasiv. The Jew has to turn on the fire. The guy can't turn on the fire. When in reality, if the guy turns on the fire and the Jew puts in the food, it's perfectly fine. Now, there is some logic to this, because this creates this rule. Once there's a light plug rule, so now the guy knows he can never turn on the fire. It might be good as a safety measure, this idea that the guy can never put on the fire. But from a purely halakhic standpoint, not true. The guy can turn on the fire, and the Jew will put the food in. As we're going to see later in Bishul Akum, putting the food in is a more important element than just turning on the fire. Okay. So, but back to in Pas, we're all, and I'll give you a little highlight, Ashkenazim and Sephardim is what I mean by all. We're all cool with the Jew turning on the fire and the guy putting the food into the fire. Okay, so we said the Jew could put the food into the oven. We said the Jew could turn on the fire. And then the Shulchan Aruch gets a little bit further and a little bit more interesting. And he says, even if the guy lit the fire and the Jew went and fanned the fire, making the fire larger, or the Jew threw in a kisum, like a little twig or toothpick or something. He threw in the twig. Even that is enough Jewish involvement that it will not be considered Pas Akum. That's Pas Yisroel. And we're talking about, by the way, not even just in a bakery. If you did this in the guy's house, once again, everything has to be kosher, obviously. But the Jew puts a little toothpick into the fire, a little twig into the fire, fans the fire a little bit. That is enough Jewish involvement that it is now Pas Yisroel. And this works even for later batches. I mean, not just the first batch of food that was put in. I don't mean if the fire was turned off. I mean, if the fire stays on, you put in the first batch, it's cooked. You put in a second batch. When you put in that second batch, the fuel from that twig is long gone. So it's a little bit of hard to understand why that will help. Or the waving of the fire, the fanning of the fire. Why does that help? It's long gone. And the idea is there's a hecker. When the Jew throws in the twig, that makes it recognizable. The Jew is involved in this process. Once that's recognizable, then that's good. And by the way, it's been the minhag of Jews for centuries that they would go into the Goyish bakery and the Jew would flip a twig into the oven. And the guy would always look at another stupid Jew. They probably thought there's some voodoo thing going on there, And I think a lot of the Jews themselves didn't even know what they were doing. I think it became one of those things that, you do. Now here's the shayla. What if a Jew goes into our modern day oven and the guy's baking and he goes, he opens the oven, he takes a twig and throws it in. And there's a twig sitting at the bottom of the oven, slowly getting toasted. Does that help? So l'chayr or not. Because l'chayra, before I just told you what I told you, everybody here would have looked at that guy like he was nuts. Right? That didn't help anything. So in Metzias, it didn't make the oven, the fire any hotter. And it didn't do anything. So l'chayra, that won't help. Or fanning the fire. I don't think fanning the fire does anything to our modern day oven fires. And therefore, l'chayra, that won't do anything. Sometimes there's some people like you can't just learn the Shulchan Aruch on this one and then just think the Metzias is exactly the same. The Torah didn't change, the halacha didn't change, but the Metzias changed. Now, another heter, which is maybe even a bigger chiddush, if the oven is still somewhat warm from the previous Jewish heating up, and it was turned off. It was turned off 15 minutes ago, but it's still warm. And now the guy comes and turns it on and heats it up and bakes bread, Pas Yisroel. Why? Because that oven heated up quicker since it was still warm from the previous Jew's batch. And since it was still warm from the previous Jew's batch, that sped up the heating process. And memela, that's enough Jewish involvement that we would say that bread is Pas Yisroel. Now here's the shayla. These definitely turning on the fire, for sure, lichatchila. Definitely putting the food into the baked items into the oven, it's for sure lichatchila. Definitely. The question is like this. The question is, fanning the fire a little bit, throwing in a kisam, is that lichatchila or not? So, the Aruch HaShulchan and the Isser V'Heter are both mashma that it is b'diavad. The Ramah is mashma. I think he's mashma, the Ramah, that it is lichatchila. There is a little debate on the wording of the Ramah, because the Ramah says, yesh lismay chalzeh. Now, there is two different tropes that you could read, yesh lismay chalzeh. You could throw in a kisam, yesh lismay chalzeh, it's ganz fine. Or there's the trop that you could read the Ramah, there's a v'yesh lismay chalzeh, and you could rely on it. Personally, I think the way to read the Ramah, the way that was noited to me to read the Ramah was v'yesh lismay chalzeh, and you could rely on this lichatchila. So I think the Ramah holds that this is lichatchila. But once again, there are some of the, we'll call them gedolei poskim, who want to say that this is still b'diavad. So there is some debate, and therefore it's obviously, I would say, better for a Jew to do the full process. But I think it's still lichatchila doing this. I heard somebody claim, I'm not sure, I haven't reached a final conclusion myself, I heard a Chashuv Rav questioning whether a Mahadran Heksher could rely on this and call themselves Mahadran if you have people like the Aruch HaShulchan calling it a b'diavad. And therefore he questioned, I'm not sure, I was thinking, Lamaisa, not the, at the end of the day, the Ramah is our Iker Posek over the Aruch HaShulchan. Not that we don't care about the Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan is one of our top 5, top 7 on the playing field. But, I guess in the world of Yeridea, we don't have Mishnah Berurah in Yeridea. In Yeridea, the Ramah is our man. And the Ramah seems to imply it's lechatchila. So I think we could rely on this in the full extent. But I agree there is what to debate, and I haven't reached a full conclusion. My natia is that you could call yourself Mahadran by relying on this, if it is what the Ramah says. But once again, I'm asking that I don't have clarity on this. Okay. Weiter. Now, also to note, the Jew's involvement doesn't have to be at the beginning of the baking process. It could be that the process was started, and then we realized, oh no, who put the Who turned on the oven? Who put the bread in the oven? It was the guy. It was the shiksa. It was the cleaning lady. Oh no! What now? What do you do? Let's try it. What do you do to save the day at this point?
Take it out.
So that's very good. Very good. Very good. That's a great thing. You take it out and you put it back in. If you take it out and you put it back in, you put it in 100%. It's excellent. But what if you don't want to get your hands so dirty and it's hot and I don't want to take it out and gloves and too complicated? Any other itzes that we could do? Flip a twig. Not going to work in our modern day oven. Yeah, modern day oven. What are we going to do? Raise the flame. Okay, great. That's what I'm guilty. I was leading the witness. I wanted you to say that. Okay, fine. Raise the flame. Raise the temperature. Now it's cooking at 180, and I move it to 220. Now, for the Fahrenheit people, I'm really a Fahrenheit person when it comes to how hot it is outside. When it comes to oven, I'm Celsius. It's a little complicated. So I think you can figure it out if you think about it. So you take your oven from 250 and you bring it to 300. Right? Is that going to work? So I'm going to give you an argument that won't work. Why? What actually happens when you change that oven from 180 to 220? What actually happens when you do that? So the oven's on, right? Let's say the oven was on when you did this, right? The flame was on. The thermostat was, right now it was 173 degrees in the oven, and it was set to 180. The thermostat was going to tell the oven, when you hit 180, shut off. When I hit 180, the thermostat was going to tell the oven, you fire should shut off. So the thermostat was waiting there with his, let's vision it as a bucket of water, waiting for when the fire hits 180, the thermostat is going to throw his bucket of water on the fire, so to speak. Now, when I pressed the button and I said 220, I just told the thermostat, you know that bucket that you're holding that you want to put out the fire? Wait a couple of minutes. Now, is that pashut that I actually caused the bread to cook? Let's say there was a guy with a bucket. I was cooking on a bonfire, right? Forget the modern day oven. We had a bonfire and we're roasting hot dogs on the bonfire. And one guy was about to go with the guy put it up there. Forget the hot dogs, the hot dog buns. Making hot dog buns. Yeah, weird, whatever. The guy was making hot dog buns on the bonfire. And there was the guy put it up. And there was another guy about to come with a bucket of water, and I, the Jew, held the guy back with the bucket of water for 5 minutes.
Was the temperature of the fire getting hotter?
No. The temperature in the fire was steady by the bonfire, and I'm holding the guy back, not letting him pour the fire out. Is that Pas Yisroel or Pas Akum? It's for sure Pas Akum. I didn't do anything. I just held the guy down who wanted to throw the bucket, the head counselor who wanted to throw the bucket of water on the bonfire. I was holding him back. That's all I did. The guy cooked it. That's for sure Pas Akum. Surely the oven is the same thing, and therefore it's Pas Akum.
Well, the temperature is getting hotter.
The temperature is getting hotter.
By your muscle, the temperature of the fire is staying the same.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
I can hear
You can hear it both ways. So, Lemaisa, there are poskim that say what I just said. And there are poskim that argue and say, the point of the kisum, the point of that little twig was a hecker. Nowadays, there's no greater hecker of involvement in the baking process than the guy going and turning the oven up from 180 to 220. And to me, the second side in the poskim seems pashut correct. It's even, once you hear that, it's even hard to understand the first side. Don't get so involved in the nitty-gritty technicals. And when you do the twig, you haven't done that much either, let's face it. Over here, you did mamash a hecker that you're involved in the cooking process. And the mela, that should certainly be fine. Now, there are eitzes that I'm going to say in a minute, which are just better, because why get involved in Lamdisha machlekes, as we just were. You could shut the oven off and turn it right back on. That for sure counts. Or you could, even easier, open the oven door and close it. You know, on Shabbos, we would tell you if the oven was on and you closed the door, you were over bishul, because there was non-cooked food in the oven. Cause that's why, if you don't peek in the cholent pot to see if it's fully cooked yet, because if it's not, you're in trouble, because you can't put the lid of the cholent pot down, because you're going to speed up the cooking. So too, you can't close the door of the oven if the food is not fully cooked, because you're speeding up the cooking. Because, it's obviously going to cause it to heat up more when the oven's closed. So therefore, open the oven door, close the oven door, that would work just fine. Now, what do we do nowadays? Nowadays we have some technical difficulties. This all works very well, the raising the temperature, turning on the fire. And in Eretz Yisrael, we can really do this everywhere, because let's face it, there's a firm person within a 5-minute drive of every factory or every store in Eretz Yisrael. Unless, you're making, Ramallah bread, and you want to have an OU on it for some reason, and that's like a little complicated, or, Gaza bread. I mean, now you can make some Gaza toast, actually. But you want to how do you do it? Yeah? So, what are the eitzes? So, one of the eitzes so over here in Eretz Yisrael is not much of a problem. But in the international world of kashrus, certainly in America, they have middle of America factories, which are very difficult to get to on a consistent basis. And certainly they have somewhere in some village deep in China somewhere, some factory where they make some whatever products, some pretzels or something like that. What could you do if you want to make that Pas Yisroel? Now, it happens to be, the truth is, the kashrus organizations usually rely on Pas Palter. So this shiur, by the way, is very negea, these Pas Akum, Pas Palter shiurim. It's not some theory, but it has the hashkachas, so we're all good. Most of the hashkachas, the international ones, will rely on Pas Palter. Things that, as we said last week, you shouldn't eat on Shabbos, and you shouldn't eat on Aseret Simei Tshuva, even though there's a big fat OU on it. So, because they rely on Pas Palter. But when it comes to Bishul Akum, there's no such thing as I rely on Bishul Akum. If you rely on Bishul Akum, you're not from. But so that doesn't work. But so I'll tell you some of the eitzes that could be used. They're most of the time used for Bishul Akum, but they could be used for Pas Akum as well. So there is the famous eitzah. One eitzah is the OU's eitzah. They're able to turn on the ovens of the factory in China remotely. So every day they have somebody at, I don't know.
Technology.
Huh?
Chinese technology.
Chinese technology, perhaps. They go, probably Israeli technology. I don't know. So they go, there's somebody in the OU office, I have no idea what the times are, who every day at 2 p.m. he says, oh, look, it's 5 a.m. in China right now. And the guy in the OU office at 2 p.m. in OU office in Manhattan presses a button, and all of a sudden turns on the oven in the office in the factory in China. Is that considered Bishul Yisrael? That the oven, there's not a Jew within 500 miles of the place. Is that considered Bishul Yisrael? So, I know Rav Heinemann questioned this. And Rav Heinemann said, no, you need Jewish involvement. Sitting in the office in Manhattan is not Jewish involvement. There's a complete disconnect between the Jew and the oven. And that's not considered Jewish involvement, and that doesn't count. And Dr. Rav Heinemann, you know what I call that stuff? I call it Pas Akum. Or if it was Bishul Akum. Dr. Rav Belsky, and he says, whoa, wait a second over here. I'm going to say this in my own words, my own examples. If I go to my house, my smart home, on Shabbos, and I say, Alexa, please turn on the heat. And Alexa says, sure, I'll turn on the heat. L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh. On Shabbos. And now the heat is turned on in my house, in my smart home. I didn't press the button. Is there any shayla in the world that I am, any tzad to say I'm not over the Isser, the Reisa, of turning on the heat on Shabbos? I didn't do it. I just told Alexa to do it. No, it's Nerishkei, Shtus. You're 100% Usser. Why? You're 100% over, I should say. Because that is a Meisa B'Yadayim. That is the way to turn on the heat in your smart home. In your smart home, the button for turning on the heat is saying, Alexa, please turn on the heat. Suri, is Suri still around? I feel like I haven't heard about Suri in a while. I don't know if Suri is still around, but a nice Yiddish Mädel. Suri, please turn on. This Suri is very goyish, the Apple Suri. Suri, please turn on the heat. That's a problem. That's not even Amir Akum over there. I don't care how goyish Alexa is. That's not Amir Akum. That's Meisa B'Yadayim. That's Asr Midaraisa. Because that's how you do it. When this guy in the OU office goes and presses the button and turns on the oven, that's how you turn on the oven. It's not even like some B'diavad type of Jewish involvement. He mamish turned on the oven. And I think it's pashut, like Rabbi Belsky says, and I think it's pashut that would work. Okay, but the Star Kid doesn't hold of this. Rav Heinemann doesn't hold of this. So what do? The glow plug, or the glow bulb. I heard these two terms. I'm not sure if there are two terms for the same item, or they're separate items, the glow plug and the glow bulb. But when I heard them both described, they were described the same exact way. So I'm going to assume it's the same thing. What they do is, they go to that factory in China, or in Middle America, mashgiach, technical guy, and they install inside the oven a very bright, very strong, powerful, like incandescent-y light bulb type thing that is always on. They turn it on and it stays on. It'll stay on for 2-3 years. They have a schedule, I guess, how every couple of years to replace it or whatever. But it will stay on for years. And therefore, and this thing provides heat. Incandescent light bulb provides heat. It's even hotter than incandescent light bulb. So it's providing heat. I mean, we're talking about a massive industrial oven, so it's like, less than 0.1% of...
It's like a twig.
It's like a twig. No, exactly. It's like a twig. But in a way, it's better than a twig. The way that it's better than a twig is, it's like a twig in that the amount of fuel that it provides is very limited. But in a way, it's better than a twig because its fuel doesn't get extinguished. Meaning the twig burns out. This does not burn out. It continuously provides that little teensy amount of heat. So there, in fact, I could hear an argument that it's better than the twig. So that goes, and Mamela, that's always providing heat. So amazing, it's a kisam always there. And amazing, and Rav Heinemann's very happy. Zocht Rav Belsky from the OU. Wait a second. You call that Pas Yisroel? Bishul Yisroel? You know what I call it? I call it Pas Akum. I call it Bishul Akum. Why? You need the Jewish involvement. You need the Jew to do something, daily, or maybe not necessarily daily, but has to continuously go every so often and be part of the process. This glow bulb, he puts it in once, and then it doesn't show up for another 2 years to replace it. Where's the Jewish involvement? The Mela, it's Pas Akum. So Rav Belsky wouldn't eat the Star K stuff, and Rav Heinemann wouldn't eat the OU stuff. And if you want to be machmer for both, move to Eretz Yisrael. So, what do you do? Now, I think actually, I'm really fine with the glow bulb. Because since consistently, if it was the type of thing that was installed and would stay there, but it wouldn't give heat beyond the first day, then I hear. I don't care if it's there, but it's not doing anything anymore. So there's no longer any Jewish involvement. But once there's heat coming out, there's an element of the Jewish involvement. There isn't a Maisa of the Jew continuously, but there is a Taitzah of the Jewish Maisa, which is consistently there. And since the Taitzah, the outcome of the Jewish action, is continuously there, if I look with a knowing eye at what's going on here, I'll see that there's always Jewish involvement. And furthermore, I imagine when there's going to be some, Chinese engineer who's going to come because something went wrong with the machine or something or whatever, he's going to open up the oven and say, "What's that?" I imagine it's something strange, not standard. So therefore, there is some Jewish nickerness, you could recognizableness that remains. Fine. Therefore, I'm really fine with either way. Another mahalach that has been used, this is not as much necessarily what's relied on by the big things in China as much, because everybody knows it's a joke, but is more used by a restaurant type setting. And people have been using this for a long time, and tzarchin. The good old heter of the pilot light. So I think part of the confusion is based on the fact that there have been different types of pilot lights throughout the dairies. So we're going to speak about 3 different types of pilot lights. One type of pilot light is where it actually performs part of the cooking. It's like the center of the burner. You have a burner, and the center of the burner has a little flame that is constant, is consistent. And when you turn on the gas, that little part of the flame will ignite the rest of the burner, and together they will cook. It's true that little flame is only doing 1% of the cooking, but that little flame is doing actual cooking, even though it's very minor. It's part of the greater burner. So in that type of oven, I'm perfectly fine with relying on the pilot light. Because, that's a kisam. It's true that just like I said by the glow bulb, I don't care that the Jew lit it a year ago. But at the end of the day, since it's doing part of the cooking, it's fine. That's Pas Yisroel. The only problem with those is I've heard the claim that if you believe the restaurant that says, "Oh yeah, that never goes out," because apparently the mitzias is when soup overflows or whatever overflows, it puts out the fire. Don't worry, it's okay. The guy could relight it. Wait, what? I mean, none of the mashkiach is going to do it. You have a mashkiach tamidi? No. Oh, so when the soup goes on, the guy will probably say, the guy is chef that cares about his cooking and his reputation, will probably say, "Oh, we'll just wait 2 hours until the Jewish mashkiach might show up after his mincha." Is today Yom Kippur Katan? That's a problem. But as I once heard a Rav say, I don't want any mashkichim who daven Yom Kippur Katan. Fine. So, Lamaisa, let's face it, they go out, and I heard somebody say, if you believe that the pilot light never goes out, I have a bridge to sell you, or I could just sell you the food from that restaurant. So that's a technical problem. Now, if you have a mashkiach tamidi who's always around and always on top of things, okay, beseder, that we're not choshesh that the guy is going to go and need to relight it if there's a mashkiach tamidi always on scene, always in the kitchen. But that is not usually the case. Okay, so that's the old pilot light, which I'm saying is, in theory, is perfectly fine. In mitzias, tzarchin. And another problem, by the way, with the pilot light, especially this is the type of thing, some people in their houses, this is a little bit better. You have a pilot light in your house. Somebody wants to let the cleaning lady, or the live-in help, who's to actually cook. And don't worry, we have a pilot light. And let's say you have the type that I just mentioned. You should be good. One thing you have to be careful about is, when your oven broke a year and a half ago, and you called in Joe, the oven guy, to fix it. Joe, the big guy with all the tattoos down his arm, you know what I'm saying? Not very Jewish Joe. So a lot of times when he goes to fix the oven, he actually doesn't like getting burnt. So what he's going to do is he's going to shut off the pilot. But don't worry, he'll turn it back on afterwards. So for the last year and a half, you thought you were having Pas Yisroel, but you're really having Pas Joe. And Pas Joe is a problem. So that's just something to be careful about. But if you are careful about that Nakuda, then in a chinami, it could work. That eitzah. Next is, by the way, there's other issues with goyim, but you might be able to solve that with video cameras. I'm just putting that on the side. Next, there's another type of pilot light, which is the more common one nowadays, which it doesn't actually act as part of the burner. Rather, the burners get lit from it, but it itself doesn't provide any heat into the actual cooking of whatever's on the stovetop. That type is a big machlokes, and the Maisa, it's very b'diavad. It's very b'diavad to use that. We call that eish me'eish. And eish me'eish, because your eish didn't really cook. It really came from a different eish. And memela, whether that's the same thing as throwing in a twig, not pashut at all. And we should not rely on that lechatchila, b'diavad, that could be relied upon. Now, there's the newer ovens with pilots, not that I even understand this, but the pilots don't stay on the whole time. That's a waste of good resources. Rather, the pilot goes off, and when you turn on the oven, it gets reignited. Now, I don't really understand myself what's the point of a pilot in that situation. I'm not really sure. But apparently, they still call it a pilot. That's for sure a problem, because whoever turned on the oven turned on the pilot. So that doesn't help you. But they still call it a pilot light. So you can't get tricked into that. Okay? Fine. Let's speak a little bit further about maybe some saving grace on some bread. Not talking about right now. I'm not talking about the chol of Akum issues, which I think are, as I said last week, chol of Akum is a much bigger issue than pas palter, in my opinion. Let's say I'm makbid on pas palter, but I'm not makbid on chol Yisroel for some strange reason. So, could I have a Thomas English muffin? For those that don't know what Thomas English muffins are, too bad. So, it's something that's it's a commercially made bread product that only comes like 80-90% done, and you're meant to put it into the toaster and toast it till it's complete and put on some delicious butter afterwards. Geschmack. Yeah, so are you allowed to have that? It's milchiks, that's one problem, but we're not discussing that here. We're discussing is it a problem of pas palter, or is that, so the answer is that's fine. So at the Shulchan Aruch, if the Jew goes and puts it back into the oven and improves it and finishes it, makes it into a better product, then that's Pas Yisroel. As long as it's not a finished product completely. I'll discuss that in a second, about a finished product and when it's completely finished. But the pashtus is that if it's 90% done, if it's 90%, then everybody agrees that from you bring it from 90% done to 100% done, that's fine. English muffins don't come 100% done. You're expected to go and put it in the toaster, and since you're expected to go and put it into the toaster, that is Pas Yisroel. Similarly, Eitzah, I went to Yehupitzville on a conference. For work-wise, I went for a conference, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in terms of kosher food, whatever. It ended up working out anyways, whatever. But when I was researching what to do, somebody gave me the advice, why don't you go to Costco? And what am I going to do? Costco in Yehupitzville has kosher bread? No way. Their ovens are for sure treif. And he said, why don't you go? What happens is the main Costco factory or whatever it is sends out these breads they come, I think, frozen to each individual Costco location. They're 80% cooked, and they get put into the ovens in Costco to bring them to 100%, and they get sold fresh, even though they were made previously and frozen. They're made 80% and frozen. Now, at the time, I hadn't learned the sugya yet, but I said, listen, I'm makbid, I'm Pas Yisroel. I don't have Pas Palter. But now because the guy was suggesting, once again, to ask the person behind the counter, I don't want one that came out of the oven. I want one before it came in the oven. And she'll look at me like, what, are you crazy? And they're like, yeah, me, crazy. Can I have one of those ones that didn't yet go into the oven? And they'll say, no problem, because there's the OU on the package. So that was... that really is a good eitzah. You could go and you hope it's filled. Go to Costco, get those 80% done breads, finish it up in your own oven after you self-clean it or whatever it is to kosher the oven wherever you're staying. And Mamela, you have nice, good, fresh bread, Pas Yisroel, anywhere where there's a Costco, which is a lot of places. So that works. Now, so that is going to be a big savior. Now we're going to get into a little bit of I was going to say a little bit of a controversial topic, but that would be a lie. A very controversial topic. What about bread that's baked by a non-religious Jew? Bread that's baked by a non-from person. For those in Eretz Yisrael, this is a huge, huge kashrus point. Because there's so many bakeries, so many places where there's, it's not so difficult. Even if you have most of the people in the bakery are Muhammad and Ahmed and Yasser, it's not so hard to get one Nimrod in there. You know what I'm saying? For those unacquainted, Nimrod is like an Ofer, a Jew. So with interesting non-religious Jewish names. So. But it's much easier to get an ofer into the kitchen than it is to get a yankel. You remember Yankel doesn't like the waking up 4 o'clock in the morning. He's going to be it's much easier to get ofer there than yankel. It's just the mitzias. So could we get ofer to turn on the oven, and then Muhammad and Yasser could do their thing, and will we have kosher bread? So there's a huge, 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 huge importance. So. Generally in halacha, we say that a mummer has the din of a goy. Seemingly, somebody that doesn't keep Shabbos, seemingly, you would assume is a mummer. He doesn't keep Torah and mitzvahs. And if he's a mummer, he has the din of a goy. But wait a second, let's think about this critically. What was the whole issue of Pas Akum? And by the way, this will not translate as simply to Bishul Akum. Because Bishul Akum, there's 2 reasons given. But by Pas Akum, there's only one reason. Mishum chasanos. We don't want you to go to your neighbor's house and eat their cookies, because that will cause intermarriage. Ofer, who's married to Chagit, Ofer, who's married to Chagit, is their kids are Jewish. And if their kids are Jewish, so what's the issue? Their kid might have even gone to some conference from his Dabrut and what's the other, Arvim or whatever, Archim or Hidabrut or whatever, and God's fine. So what's the problem having bread from Ofer and Chagit? So l'chayra ma'baya, and therefore, if you at first glance, it should be no problem. Why are we going to have a problem with this? But remember when we discussed the issue we discussed maybe I could have bread made by a goy that has no kids, a priest even that's not going to have kids. So we saw that the Taz said loy plug. I don't care if he's the priest. Goy bread, loy plug. You're not allowed to have goy bread. And we remember the Shach said that yes, it's true that this guy doesn't have kids, but the next guy does have kids, and therefore you're going to be involved and you're going to get mixed around. Now, over here, when we have our Ofer, the baker, what do we think? Maybe it's just a light plug, and if he has a din guy, I don't care if he has Jewish daughters. Let me ask you a question. If there was a guy who had Jewish daughters, his daughters were Megayer. Yeah, he was a priest. His father was a priest. His grandfather was a priest. Wait a second. That doesn't work, right? Okay, so, or maybe it does. So the priest has a bunch of daughters who are all Megayer. Yeah? And the guy has a bunch of daughters that were Megayer. They were all Megayer. Could I go have the guy break bread for me? Oh, what's the problem? I'll marry his daughters? Gewaldig. Gary Tzedek. So obviously not. Because if he's a guy, he's a guy. And what if there's a Jewish guy, the Jew married a guy, and has goyish daughters? Right? The Jew married a guy and has goyish daughters. And now the Jew did a shtickle tshuva from whatever. Now he's from a guy. I want to know, can I eat his bread? Do I have to worry about Mishum Chasdanis? We'll come to marry his daughters. His daughters are goyim. So for sure you could eat his bread because he's a Jew. We don't factor in who your daughters are. We factor the guy. And therefore someone want to say that therefore, obviously, we're not going to eat the bread of Ofer, the non-from Jew. I don't like the argument so much. Because those were cases of people that were a metzias of a guy. People that are a metzias of a guy, you can't change it. Or somebody who's a metzias of a full-fledged Jew, you can't change it. Over here, he's a metzias of a Jew with a Torah's din guy. He's a Jew that we treat like a guy. I don't have a proof from those examples that a Jew that we generally treat like a guy, who the whole siba for the takana doesn't apply, that we're going to treat him like a guy. So I think it's pretty unclear. Lamaisa, when we start looking through the Paiskim, so we'll see, it actually surprised me again a little bit. So the Pri Megadim brings the Pri Chadash and says that by a Karite, the Karites, their bread is asa. That's Pas Akum. And they have the din of a guy. And a Machal Shabbos has the din of a guy. The Darchei Tshuva says a Mummer has the din of a guy. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is Machmer to say they have a din of a guy. The Avnei Nezer also asers the bread of the non-religious and says he has the din of guy. So this was a little surprising to me. Until, one thing, the Piskei Tshuva, however, brings the Tiferes L'Maisha that says a Mummer is allowed to, because L'Maisha Tachlis, the Svar that we've been saying, he has Jewish daughters. My problem here is, I like the Svar Be'etzim of the Tiferes L'Maisha, but I'm very outnumbered. Because it seems to be the majority of Poskim asered the bread of this Mummer. Rav Moshe comes to save the day a little bit, Moshe Feinstein, and he says that it's for sure, the halach is for sure like the halach is like the Tiferes L'Moshe, that we're allowed to have the bread of a Mummer, and it's a Temuah how all these other people are going to argue with the Tiferes L'Moshe, because it's pashut from the sugya that it comes out that you should be allowed to have the bread of a mummer. So I found that pretty interesting. Now, but at the end of the day, we always know the klal. You could always be semech of Ramesha, but L'maisa is outnumbered. Now, something interesting, by the way, that I'll hold off on that. Now, what about the Binyan Siyan? I know everybody's thinking about it. The famous Binyan Siyan. So he says that nowadays, the Friday Yidden of today, the non from today, they don't make them like they used to. The Mumarim of today, they don't make them like they used to. They're not like the old ones that were mamish, with the Reb Chaim smoking the cigarette on Shabbos. They don't make them like that anymore. He said this like 200 years ago. And nowadays, the Mamarim, they're not real Mamarim. They're not Mahudadika Mamarim. And therefore, they're just Tinik Shenishba. And therefore, they don't have the dinim of Mamarim. And therefore, their bread would be fine. The Marshag also says the same thing. Nowadays, our Mamarim aren't real Mamarim, they're Tinik Shenishba. The Chazon Ish says the same thing, and he's the one, the big one who brings Tinik Shenishba in the modern day, and he says nowadays they're all Tinik Shenishba. And we all know that people throw around the Svar very easily of Tinik Shenishba, and I'm not convinced it's so as pashut as everybody makes it. So, why are they Tinik Shenishba? So the Chazon Ish explains because the non-from nowadays, they're becheskes, that if you would tell them about Yiddishkeit, and you'd have the right person come and tell them about Yiddishkeit, and explain to them the beauty of Yiddishkeit and the truth of Yiddishkeit, they become from. It's just a matter of chasur yediyah. It's a matter of lacking knowledge. And if you just supply that knowledge, then they would become from, and that's the chazaka, and therefore they don't have a din of mummer. Maybe. And once again, I'm not coming here to argue in the Chazon Ish. I wasn't around in the 1950s when the Chazon Ish said this, but I'm just saying it's lav davka that the mentality of the not from 70 years later is the same mentality of the not from 70 years earlier. I don't know. If you got some Geshmak Akir, if you guys got Avram the Yitzchak and Uri Zohar, back alive, whatever, and you got them in a room, I don't know what they're, with a random Chaloni guy from Tel Aviv. You're going to have a chazaka he's going to become from? Maybe. I'm not so convinced. But maybe. Maybe the Varda is by Svardim. Maybe you could say it. By Ashkenazim you can't. If you know the mentality in Israel a little bit. Maybe that's a Vart. Sarachin. Not Pashut is all I'm saying. And the fact that Chasur Yediyah, Rav Elyashiv didn't hold of this. Rav Elyashiv held that none of them are Tinik Shenishba, they're all a bunch of Mumarim. Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was a very nice man, he also said they're a bunch of Mumarim. I'm just pointing out. I'm not coming here to pick sides. But if we think about the Svar of the Chazon Ish, I don't even know if the Svar of the Chazon Ish applies nowadays. What does the Chazon Ish say? They're Chasur Yediyah. They just don't know. Nowadays, how long would it take that non-from person in Tel Aviv to find out a little bit about Yiddishkeit? All he has to do is stick his hand into his pocket, pull out his phone, and type in, why do Orthodox Jews keep Shabbos? Keep Shabbat? And read up on it, and make your decision. So you can tell me that guy's Tinik Shenishba, he lacks the knowledge? The knowledge is so accessible. Now you might want to say he's brainwashed by society, and therefore he won't come to... you could argue that he has a chiyuv of at least doing a little bit of investigation. He knows that 20% of the country is Haredi. He knows that there's even these Mizrahi guys they seem to be pretty good people, these Mizrahi guys, and they keep Shabbos. He knows this. He can't open his phone and check it out. And therefore, I don't think it's so pasha. I did a little test. I typed into my phone, why do Orthodox Jews keep Shabbat? And the first thing was the OU. I'm like, okay, you have a chiv to check. And then I went to the second thing, was Reform Judaism. So now I became a little bit unsure because I see you could type the right question and still get the wrong answer. So maybe you still have a taina of Chasur Yediyah. Sarchin. It's definitely what to think about. Okay, weiter. So as I said, not everybody holds of this nowadays, and it's not so pashut. Now, the Chazon Ish asked on himself, wait a second. I'm saying that the non-from people are not mamarim because they're just chas yudiyah. Wait a second. The Pri Megadim said the Karayim are mamarim. Surely the Karayim, the Ein Tinuk Shenishba Gedolim Mizu. They're a 7th generation Karite. 17th generation Karite. They have their own shtibels and their own poskim. So how could you say that that's not a Tinuk Shenishba? So the Chazon Ish answers on himself and he says, no. But the Karayim, even if you try to explain them something, you'll get nowhere. They have their shitas. And therefore you're going to get nowhere. And since you're going to get nowhere, that's not a Tinuk Shenishba, that's a mummer. Once again, tzarchin with our people nowadays, whether they're Bali Shita or whether they're Chas Yudiyah, there is certainly what to debate. Now, Ramosha Sternbach says something interesting, which if you just read this line without the sugya, you would understand. But once you read this line within the sugya, it makes perfect sense. Ramosha Sternbach says, L'chatchila, you should be machmer not to have food baked by a non-from, right? Or food cooked by a non-from. I think baked, I think it was Pas Akum. But he says, B'shas tzarech, you could be mekel, except unless the one who baked it was reformed. When you first read this, like, who cares whether he's Stam Chaloni or he's Reform? But now it makes sense. The Stam Chaloni doesn't have Shitas. The Reform is like the Karayim. There's a Shita. Now, I don't know if this is so true nowadays by your average Reform Jew in America that doesn't know anything. The Reform Rabbi, this would be true. The Stam Reform Jew, Tzarchin, if it's true. But that's what Moshe Sternbach says, and I thought it was very interesting. L'maisa Rav Avadia is Mekel. The Tzitz Eliezer is Mekel, and Rav Asher said the minig was to be Mekel by the guy who bakes the bread. L'maisa, I think we have a lot to put together, and also there's another question of who is a mummer. I remember when I was, there's a general klal that people use once you're a mummer l'davar echad, you're a mummer l'kol tarakula. I don't know how clearly that applies. I mean, once again, in lots of places, if we apply that, it'll be very hard to get a minyan. Because, you tell me, let's make an example. This guy doesn't keep gazela. He steals. And that guy doesn't keep lashon hara. So,
For Hesha?
yeah.
Okay.
This guy speaks lashon hara but farhesya. Now you're going to tell me he's a mummer l'kol Torah kula? It's a little bit hard to swallow. I'm not saying there isn't a basis for this in Chazal. Then you tell me he doesn't count as a minyan, and you tell me, I don't know. You tell me that guy's bread is Pas Akum? Might be a little bit hard to swallow. Yeah, I'm finishing up with this, and I remember there's this idea of you have to be Mechal Shabbos before Hesia to be considered a real mummer. I remember there was somebody that said, I think it was Rav Avadia that said, that if you wouldn't be Mechal Shabbos in front of a Rav, then he's not considered Mechal Shabbos for Hesia. So let's just think about this for a second. That not from Svardi guy, work Ofer. He might talk on his phone on Shabbos, but if he realized that Rav Yitzchak Yosef was coming down the street, he would say, "Gotta go," and put his phone in his pocket. He won't talk on his phone in front of Rav Yitzchak Yosef. So maybe that's already a little tzad to say that he wouldn't be considered an absolute mummer. Or you have the chaver that make kiddush Friday night and are machal Shabbos day. I'm not so quick to call those guys a mummer. So I think if you have one of these people that are in these in-between matzavim, I think we have enough to rely on from the fact that we have Rav Moshe Feinstein, who said that L'maisa were mekel altogether. We have the Chazon Ish, once again debatable if it applies nowadays, but the Binyan Sion seemingly applies. The Chazon Ish, maybe they're Tinuk Shenishba. You have the tzad of, are these guys real mumarim anyways? I think if you combine all that, you're fine. If, though, it's not Ofer, the Sephardi guy in the kitchen, but it's the world-famous Ashkenazi Chiloni chef, who's a real mummer. He actually learned in yeshiva. and he went off to become this famous whatever chef, then that already I agree, or the yeshiva bracha that went off, that I agree, l'chayr we should be machmir. But if it's one of these guys that are somewhat questionable about their mummer status altogether, I think there's enough sniffim lehakol, even lechatchila. But once again, don't take my word as the final word. That's just my opinion, and have an amazing week.